Hey patrons, welcome back to another tutorial series. In this one we're going to be working on drawing a baby using charcoal pencils. And so the first thing that I want to do is just show you guys the supplies that I'm going to be using for this tutorial. The first thing that I'm going to be using is a couple of different brushes. We're going to be mostly using brushes to blend our charcoal powder. And so I'm using a Filbert brush, and this is a Daler Rowney one. And I'm also just using a silver black velvet size 2 brush, and this is just for the slightly more detailed areas. Also for blending, we will be using potentially a couple of blending stumps. I've just got a bigger one and a slightly smaller one just in case where you need to use them. For highlights, we're using the Tombow Mono Eraser. As you guys know, I love that for the little details, but we might need to use the kneaded eraser to lighten up the sketch and for any more subtle highlights. So I've got that as well. I've also got a roll of just tissue paper, toilet paper, in case I want to blend some larger areas and smooth them out with that. Now for the pencils, I'm using the Generals charcoal pencils. I have got a 2H extra hard pencil, and so this is going to be for little details. And then for laying down sort of dark shadows, I'm going to be using mainly the 2B charcoal pencil. But as you can see, because it's really small, I might have to go over to my 4B pencil, which is also quite small by now, but I'll see how I get on. But those are all of the supplies I'm going to be using. Oh, one of the supply that I'm using is this. This is a soft charcoal block, and I've just put that on my, just like rub that on a scrap piece of paper so that I can get some of the charcoal powder. And I'm just going to very carefully lift this up so I can show you guys this is the charcoal powder that we're going to be using and dipping our paintbrush into. And I'll just be rubbing off the excess onto the cleaner bottom part of that scrap piece of paper. In this part, we're going to be focusing on drawing her face. I thought I would do this reference because I haven't drawn a baby yet in charcoal for you guys. And also this reference image had a lot of other things that we can do like tutorials on, like drawing the blurred frills of the dress and the flowers on the hairband and these little feathers. So I thought it'd be a really good and challenging reference photo for us to tackle today. Now, like I said, I want to start off firstly with the face, and I'm going to go in with the kneaded eraser and just lightly lift up the sketch on some of the lighter areas of the reference where the shading that I've done, while the sketch outline that I've done is a bit darker than the actual value for that area. So for example, where I've done the outline for the contours on the skin, just lightly rubbing the eraser. I still want to be able to see the lines, but only ever so slightly. Just pulling up the excess graphite. What I love about charcoal is the fact that you don't get that shine like you do with graphite, and the fact that you can get really nice dark values quite easily. And as you can see in this reference, we have got quite a few intense, really dark values. So that's why I thought that charcoal would be a perfect medium to use for this, as well as the fact that we've got a lot of just really nice smooth values and blurred sort of background, blurred shading that we've got to do. Just going around the side of the nose. Especially with a baby's face, it's going to be very soft, not many harsh edges at all. So you want to make sure your sketch is really light so that we don't have any harsh edges or really dramatic, harsh lines. Also gonna just go and dab the mouth just to lighten that up as well. So I'm just erasing all of the lines, even the ones around the face, like the flowers here, because they are touching the face, so we will be working close to those areas. And so yeah, I'm pretty happy with that now. And let's go in straight away with the eyes, and there are quite a few really dark values for the eyes. So I'm going to go in with the 2B charcoal pencil, and I'm first going to just go in and get in the pupils. I'm not going to press hard on the charcoal pencil, and I'm not going to be adding any shading because I'm going to be doing that with the paintbrush. I'm literally just going in and blocking in the darkest values of the eyes. You can blow away the excess very lightly. So also there's dark values right around the outside of the iris, just going around it, around the bottom between these two highlights. I'm being quite light to start off with my shading. This would be much easier if you had a slightly longer pencil to work with. It's harder to control when you have it really small. It's harder to hold and all of that stuff. So I'm definitely not going to add this pencil everywhere. Even for more shadowed areas, I'm not adding it to all of them because I can still add some darker shadows with the paintbrush. Going to do the same thing over on this side. Okay, so now we've got the eyes in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my little brush, my little paintbrush, and I'm going to start to use this to blend some of the charcoal powder around. So I'm blending it on the whole of the iris. I'm not worrying about the highlights yet because I can pull them up with the Tombow Mono Eraser. I'm just going to use it to fill in the whole of the iris. I'm also going to add a bit of value towards the top here, the top of the eyelid. So I'm purely using the charcoal that we've got already on the eyes. I've not gone into my scrap piece of paper. Just using what's already here for the moment. Going to do the same thing on this side. And as you can see, it just creates a really nice, soft, even value on the rest of the eyes. So as you can see on both of the eyes, the tear duct area is quite dark. Just adding some value to the whole of the white of the eye. lightly going to add some value around the eyes. I'm now going to go in with my little blending stump and just use this to add some shadow to the tear duct area. The blending stump was already a bit dirty from using it before, so I've not had to add any extra charcoal to it. Also using it to blend the shadow on the iris, just make it more of a soft transition. Softer transition between the darkest values and the other values. I'm now going to go in with the extra hard pencil for this eye. Just use that to add the details. Because this is the 2H pencil, it's quite a light charcoal pencil, so it'll work really nicely for these values. You can also use it to add some more details to the iris and better define the shape of the iris. Add in some subtle shading on the white of the eye. Going back to the iris, add in some details. I'm not adding directly charcoal to the highlights, because if I add lots of charcoal directly to the highlights, then it'll be hard to erase them. Going back in with the soft brush, just to blend out this area. Add some value just above the eye. So I want to go in again with the blending stump. Just better define the shape of the eye. Just going to get a little bit of charcoal powder from my scrap piece of paper onto my brush and just use this to add some shading just below the eye, just on this bit of skin. As you can see, there's a bit of a shadow. Be careful not to get too much powder on the paper. And I'm just going to blend that out with the larger brush. Just add more even shading to the area around the eye. Add some shading to the whole of the skin around the eye. And I'm going to add a little bit more intense shading to where the eyebrow is going. So add a bit of shading all of the way around the skin. You really don't need much charcoal on the brush for this. In fact, really try to make sure that you're going in with as minimal charcoal on the brush as possible to start with, because you can always build up more if you need it. And then I just scrub it in with circular motions. So I'm just going to go in with a little bit more charcoal powder. Just get in the shape for where the eyebrows are. So I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit with a bit of tissue. Just go in and blend this out a bit more and just lighten it up. I want to go back in with the 2H. Add a little bit more shading just to this side. Be very careful when you're doing this. Really try to take your time. Just going to add the little crease under the eye. And just give it a little blend over the top. I'm trying to look at the shape of the shadows and highlights, so trying to look at the way they curve. I'm going in on the eyebrow and just adding a few of these little hairs. And just shading in the darkest part of that eyebrow. I'm just going to go over the top of that with the brush just to tone it down. Now I want to move on to the other eye. Don't really know why I worked on them this way around. It would have been much easier to do it the other way, so that I'm not rubbing it by accident. But I'm going in with the 2H pencil, and I'm just going to use this to add all of these darkest areas. Adding some 2H pencil to the tear duct area. So there we go. I've gone over all of the areas that I need to with the 2H pencil, and now I'm going in with the blending stump, and I'm just going to blend some of these areas out to soften them so it's not such a harsh edge. Adding some of the more intense shadow under the eyes. Just blending the tear duct as well. Okay, I want to quickly switch back to the 2H pencil just to add a little bit more shading, some thicker shading around the outside of the iris. Just blend over that again. And I want to go and sharpen up some of the areas for this eye now. just want to make sure everything's nice and crisp and stands out like it's supposed to. And I'm just going to add some more shading with the 2H pencil for the inner corner of the eye. There we go. Okay. Now one thing that I want to do is just give it a little blow and add in some of these highlights. So I'm being very careful as I do this. So I'm just marking them out, and then I'm going in with the 2H pencil just to better shape them. And I'm going to go in with a kneaded eraser just to add a little highlight just above the pupil, just to lighten it up. I'm also using the kneaded eraser to add a highlight just above this crease that we added. Just sweeping that eraser upwards and around the skin here, just looking for the lightest areas. A little dot on the white of the eye. And just adding more shading with the brush and the charcoal. I'm looking at where the shadows are. So now I'm going to add a base layer of charcoal to the whole of the forehead. Starting with some darker shading at the top here by the hairband. It's quite dark up here. So I'm just going back and forth over the forehead just to get in some sort of base layer. Just want to darken up that base layer. In fact, I want to get this base layer even going down towards the nose. Around this side of the cheek. I'm going to go below the mouth. Going to add some darker shading under the chin. Try and keep it nice and soft between these two areas. So I'm going to go over this area that I just blended with the brush with the tissue, just to lighten it up a bit. So if you go a little bit dark, then don't worry, because you always have the brush there to help fix it, and also just smooth over the whole area. Adding a bit of light shading over the nose. And I'm just going to blend over this area. And over the forehead. So the tissue will really help smooth everything out. Now let's go in and build up another layer using the brush. And so I'm just getting a bit more on my brush, and I'm just going to start to build up more and more layers. I'm going to be doing this in exactly the same way that I did the last layer. It's just that I'm adding another layer of charcoal to the slightly darker areas. So I'm adding it to all of the areas but the more highlighted sections. And being really careful looking at the shapes of the shadows, they're really important. Also going in and adding little, like, as you can see here, there's a bit of a darker line of a shadow. So I'm adding in those little subtle shadows as well. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and do this until we have a second layer of shading. I now just want to take some time to actually go in and add in the nostrils, the centre line for the mouth, and get in some of the shading for this. So I'm going to go in with my 2H pencil, and firstly I'm just going to shade in the nostrils very lightly. They're not really like that dark, they're not like jet black, so I'm just shading them in lightly. They're quite small as well. They're not like circles, so make sure you're really looking at the shape of the nostrils. Also very lightly going to add some shading for the contours of the nose, very lightly. Once again, it's really important to look at all of the little shapes and structures of the nose. And I'm going to go over the top with the tissue and just soften over that. Soften it out and go back in and add the nostrils again. And once again going in and adding another layer of shading. Going to go over it with my tissue. And go in once again. Just adding the nostrils this time. And I'm going to go in with my littler brush, my smaller one, and I'm going to go in and just get in some of this contour shading very, very softly. Now it can be very easy to get the nose shape wrong, so make sure you're paying extra attention when you're doing this part. Really take your time. Just keep layering and layering. It's better to spend more time on it than to rush it and put way too much on. There's absolutely no rush when it comes to this part. The face is something that you want to spend the most time on because it's where people's attention is mostly going to first be on. It's going to be on the face. Like with the frills on the dress, you can kind of get away with them if they're a little bit off, but with the face, it's just so important to get everything really, really on point. I'm going to add some more intense shadows for the nose on the sides and below the nostril. Just going to add some darker shading on this side now. So I find it really fun to actually sculpt in the face with this technique. I think it's a really cool way of adding the charcoal. It's something a little different, and it's just quite fun to like mix drawing supplies with actually like painting it on. I find that really, really fun. Just adding a little bit more charcoal for the eyebrows. I'm going to be paying more attention to the smaller little details and changes now. Going to be a little more bold with the charcoal application. Adding a bit more darker shadow right on the edge of the face. Don't worry too much if you're getting charcoal, it's like smudging it to other areas. We'll fix that when we go onto those areas, or if the area is darker than the area you're working on, then it doesn't matter because you'll be covering that up with more charcoal anyway. Add in some darker shading just below the eyes, a crease, and then some shading just around where the tear duct is. Just going to soften out that shading with the tissue. Just keep it nice and smooth. Add a bit of shadow for this bit here. Just going to add the little bit of upper eyelid that we can see. Just blend over that. Add some more shading under the eye. And add that crease. Add in some more shading into the white of the eye. Just going to add some more shading this side as well. Go back in around the nostrils and darken up the nostrils. Just going to blend a little bit with my finger as well. Often I don't really advise blending with the finger though, not too much. Now I'm just going to add some little details to the eyebrow with the 2H charcoal. Going to blend over the areas with tissue again. Now I'm going to go in and do the mouth. Really paying attention to the way the center line of the lips curves, the angle of the mouth. Now I'm just going to use that charcoal to smudge some of that up to the top lip firstly. I don't want to do this too dark. And now do the bottom lip. Going in again with the 2H pencil. Shaping the lips better for the bottom. So now I'm going to blend over it with the tissue, just to lighten it up a little bit. And then I'm going back in with the 2H pencil just to add the darkest shadows. So if you ever need to lighten up an area, then I recommend going in with the tissue and it will lighten it up a lot. going over the sides with the tissue. And I'm going to go in with a kneaded eraser and just lighten up a few bits, a few little areas. I'm now going to go through and keep making some adjustments until I'm happy with how the mouth looks. Once again, I just want to lighten the whole thing. Just keep doing it until you're happy with it. Don't feel the need to rush what you're doing. Also going to add a little bit of the Cupid's bow. Blending stump I'm using has got hardly any charcoal on it, so it's easier to get these lighter values. I'm even going to use it to add some shading just below the nose. I'm using circular motions. I'm not going back and forth, otherwise this could create start and stop points, which we do not want. Now I'm going to go in with the blending stump and add some more shading, but it's easier to control, so it's easier to press harder and get this darker shade in. I'm adding the ear as well. So I'm just going now and shading the side of the face. Just want to blend over this. I want to add some shading around the eye on this side. And around the top of the head. I'm going to add the little bits of hair. Just going to go around the shape of the flowers. Add quite a lot of shadow just around them because they are casting a bit of shadow onto the face. So now I'm just going in with the blending stump and I'm just blending out all of the charcoal pencil up here that we added. You can use the tissue just to blend this area a bit. Now I'm going to keep going in and adding more and more charcoal powder until I'm really happy with how it is all looking. And being more and more generous with the amount of charcoal I'm applying to the paper. As I'm going for darker values, you can add more of the charcoal. Now I'm going to focus more around the mouth, adding all of these shadows and contouring the skin more. So I'm looking particularly between the nose and the mouth at these little shadows. Once again, don't worry if you go a bit too dark. We can lighten that up with the tissue. So I'm going to go in with the tissue, just soften all of this out. Add some more charcoal powder. Now I'm going to go in with the 2H pencil and I'm going to start to shape the face because we've lost the shape of the face a little bit. So I am going to go in and create quite a harsh line, but don't worry, we will be softening this out in a minute. And now I'm going to add a bit of shading down here. Now I'm going to go in firstly with the paintbrush and just blend it softly. Blend it out as much as I can with this. And now I'm going to go in with the tissue and soften it all out. And so now I'm going to go in with my blending stump and start to add some shading. I'm adding some 2H. Once again, blending over the whole thing with the tissue. Now I'm just going to go around the top of the clothing, this line here, this edge, just going to get in some of these darkest edges. We're nearly done with this area now. Just going to blend this little bit out with the tissue some more. Blend this with the blending stump. And so now I'm going to go in again with the paintbrush, the smaller one, and start to build up some more of the little details. Okay. Add a little bit more shading under the chin. So now I'm going to go in with a kneaded eraser and just clean up the sides of the face. Now I'm going to look at the face and just make any final adjustments that I need to, like adding more shape around the eyebrows. We will be making adjustments as we go along. As we start to get more things in, we might notice that part of the face needs to be lighter or darker. Blend over the eyebrow. Now I'm going to add more shading inside the iris. Adding some more shading with the charcoal inside the white of the eye. Blend it a little bit more. Now I'm going to go in with the kneaded eraser and just pull up any highlights. So like highlights on the nose, within the eye. Even though we added the highlights in the eye, they might have got some charcoal added on top of them. So I'm using the kneaded eraser for all of the smaller highlights, and so like all of the little detailed highlights. I'm only using the Tombow Mono eraser if they were really harsh, but if I'm just like subtly lifting up some of the charcoal, then I'm just going to use the kneaded eraser. If I need really subtle ones, or if I need to lift some of the charcoal off of a whole area, then I'm just going to use the tissue like I am here to add a bit of highlight. Getting another clean bit of tissue and just continuing to rub it in this area to lift some of that charcoal off. Same thing over here. And same thing with the forehead. And with the chin. Just going to soften out these areas a bit as well with the tissue. So now I'm just going to pat the kneaded eraser on this area, just so there's not so much of a harsh difference. Okay. Now I'm going to go in with the charcoal and just use this to add some little hairs. So the hair of the baby. There's only a few little bits. I'm just using the 6B pencil for this, just because it's the first one I managed to pick up. Going to blend over them. Just blend them in with the rest of the area. And I'm going to switch over to the 2H for some lighter hairs. I'm going to shade in that curved area. Just crisping up the edges just between these little flower petals. Just using my finger to blend these little areas. So I'm going to do a dark line around this side because this area is really dark. Just blend that out. Go around the headband. And I'm going to shade in where the hair is up here. So it's just black, so I'm just going to go around the hairband. Just shade all of this in. And I'm just going to blend over it with the blending stump, blowing away all of the excess. Just going to add a little bit of the 6B here. Anyway guys, that is it for this first part, and in the next part we're going to be working on the flower headband, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye everybody.